Again, I may not look old, but I feel old because I have done that. Like I said, made those mistakes.
Been there, done that. Welcome back to Emphasis Tech Talks, the podcast for business leaders leveraging cutting-edge technology to raise their bottom lines. I'm David Clausen, your host with Emphasis Tech. Our guest today is Jared Christianson of Invito Energy. This episode has a lot to unpack, so be sure to like and subscribe so you can be notified of future videos as they're released. Jared has over 20 years of experience in oil and gas and is going to share how smaller, agile companies can compete with their larger competitors, some challenges that he's seen in migrating large systems, and some future plans using AI. Jared, thanks for joining us today. Let's just get started. So right off the top, knowing that our audience is about technology and using technology in businesses and how we can leverage that to be more efficient and add to our bottom lines, right? So thinking about that, what kind of challenges have you had there at Invito Energy, and how have you surpassed that with technology?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you, and yeah, definitely. I've been my 20 years, specifically in the energy business. It's mainly been upstream oil and gas. What I realized really early on, 20 years ago, that the technology and what we do today is very, very different than 20 years ago. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how we were faxing 20 years ago reports. Right? I mean, that still existed, right? The drilling rig would fax a report to you, and we were joking like we don't even have fax machines anymore, right? But yeah, just what's happened over the last, one of the big challenges, specifically in energy and the oil and gas space in particular, for me has been, I've been a part of, large public companies, small public companies, mom and pop, small oil and gas operators, and kind of every flavor in between. And here at Invito Energy Partners, we're a smaller oil and gas company, but one of the things, after kind of being in all those different contexts, that that has been really interesting is that oil and gas companies, we think of them, they make fossil fuels, but really what oil and gas companies are data companies, and a lot of the times they don't see themselves as data companies. And the reason why they don't see themselves as data companies, and I think part of that has been, they have there's so much complexity in the business of energy. You have accounting, you have geologic, land and legal, operational, regulatory and compliance, A&D. So there's lots of complexity. There's so much data in all of those disciplines. And 20 years ago, as a young guy who had a very technological kind of, mind towards wanting to innovate and kind of how can we use data better, what I found was just a lot of disorganization in between all of the different companies, and really they were very siloed. They weren't integrated. There wasn't a lot of thought processes into how are we aggregating this, what data should we use. And so that's been a challenge, specifically in the oil and gas industry. It's been really difficult, depending on the culture of those of businesses, especially some of the smaller ones or even some of the bigger ones, to get them to see that we're data companies. We're overwhelmed with data, and understanding and learning how to use that better is paramount into doing business better.
Yeah. So, boy, that really rings true to, what I've seen in the oil and gas industry as well. And, that whole sneaker net thing too, people writing stuff on notes and sending it across. And now, of course, that's a thing of the past. I don't know that you want to be buying stock in a fax business today, to your point. So what have been some of the newer initiatives? I mean, I know that you're a growing company and you're expanding a lot. What does that look like? And of course, we're very interested in how the technology's played into that.
Yeah, well, one of the unique kind of viewpoints that we have as a small business is, there's some advantages and disadvantages to being small in the oil and gas space. I think if you take a large, like an integrated major, and you look at some of the things, some of the positive and negatives that they run into when it relates to technology and data, one of the advantages that they have is obviously scale. So they have this massive machine, and scale can do a lot of things. They can bring in a lot of internal programmers and data engineers, and because they have that scale, there's a lot of things, efficiencies that they can gain there. One of the negative things is they've got a lot of legacy people, processes, and technology. And one of the downsides is, as technology moves so quickly, one of the downsides is applying that technology to companies that have been around for decades, and that application of technology can be a real challenge. For Invito Energy Partners, while we have the challenge of not having the scale, one of the advantages that we have is we don't have this massive machine of processes and legacy people and legacy systems. We can innovate extremely fast. So I'll just give you a quick story. One of those things that we ended up kind of figuring out more of just necessity was, we were typically throwing people, because we're small, at different problems we have operationally in the field. So one of that was we had a disposal line. It's a 1.5 miles long, and typically we need to check for leaks to see if that thing's leaking. I mean, we've got measurement and instrumentation on those lines, but we need to check to see if there's an issue. And typically, in some of these legacy places that I've been at, well, what do? Well, you have a person for that, right? They get in their truck, they hop out there, they, can go run multiple different lines to check for those. We've kind of taken a different approach, right? It's like, well, one, we're very remote, so there's a safety aspect. Two, we don't have the scales of efficiency, but hey, they have drones. And we can go put a thermal camera on a drone and have it run an automated, path and check that pipeline for leaks. For our small company, man, that decision was made in a day, right? So an advantage for us, right? An advantage for us. You take a larger company and try to implement that over their scale can be, they got to go through committees. They've got to do a pilot program. They've got to, we can move a lot quicker as technology evolves. An advantage for us definitely is the ability to move quickly.
Yeah. Boy, that is that is so true. I know, just to get the simplest thing changed takes so many people to buy off. And a lot of it for good reason. There's regulatory requirements that have to be met, safety concerns, both for their employees as well as for the public. And when you're running high pressure pipelines, you don't want to be making decisions on the fly that has not been vetted and that kind of thing. So it does take a long time.
And also think about it. A lot of times when we talk about technology and innovation, I don't think what gets talked a lot or enough is, sometimes what that means is somebody's job, right? And because it can be very disruptive, right? And so while they have a lot of potentially scale and, and there's a person that is sitting kind of as the gatekeeper for some of that data, technology, and change, maybe we don't have that type of, just culture and philosophy where there's not that gatekeeper, right? And we want that disruption to enter in because of our lack of scale, it brings a lot of efficiencies. And so it's never really talked enough, is that there's an alignment of incentives, right? Like why would they change? Well, there's some people that don't want change, because guess what? That means their job would change. And whenever we talk about technology or how to use it or aggregate or whatever, I think sometimes that doesn't get looked at or talked enough is, what does that mean downstream for other people and how it affects their job, right? Either potentially going away forever, or changing, right? And a lot of that change can be uncomfortable. And I think that's where you see that kind of misalignment of some of those incentives.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very valid. We've heard some of those conversations coming up about AI. I'm glad they're having some of those conversations. And then the other thing is, some of the larger organizations and larger businesses will also perpetuate a cost barrier to entry, right? So if you don't, a lot of pipelines are in the past have been surveyed by airplanes. So the guy gets up in his little Cessna and he's going to fly over and just kind of give it a visual, does everything look kosher kind of thing. It's expensive to hire those guys. Certainly it's expensive to have your own program to do that. So that makes a barrier of entry thing that kind of scares some people away. But those that are successful, like your size company, that's where you find the innovation. So you're doing some of those new things now, and eventually that will catch on, some of the things that you're doing that are differentiators, right? Eventually other organizations will catch on to that, and it will grow. And who knows, in 15 years, we may hear about the Invito such and such process that has taken over the world.
Yeah, we had talked to this, kind of previously before we jumped on, about how critical timing is of the application of technology. Like, in my experience, being at multiple different kind of large and small companies, we've made mistakes applying technology too soon. Some of that had to do with us really not understanding exactly the technology, but also the application of that technology. And sometimes you just got to do it. You just got to do it to learn. One of the things that we're doing on a lot of our facilities, so we have a lot of operated properties. We also invest in some non-operated properties as well. But one of the things that we've done on a lot of our facilities is we decided to apply a lot more instrumentation onto our facilities. We probably have 2 or 3 times the amount of instrumentation. So we had to spend money to go do that, right? But part of it was, the acquisition of data, being able to acquire all this data and figure out exactly like, okay, how are we going to use this data now? Some stuff that we've never measured before. What do we do with this data? Well, if you don't make the decision to put on some of that technology on the front end and go spend that capital up front, and then acquire that data, how do you let that technology affect decisions you make, and in the future what to do and what not to do? If you don't have the data, you can't really do that. And in my experience, you're right, that barrier to entry, that cost, boy, that's where experience comes in just having failed at misapplying technology, or being just too early there's a multitude of things that we can go and apply something to, but being able to go, okay, this is, if I have a cost center, it's got to have some sort of direct and indirect, operating cost reduction that it's tied to. And that's kind of where that experience comes in is, again, I may not know what that is, but as long as I am acquiring that data and finding new ways to apply it correctly, a lot of times what I found is by at least acquiring that data, you can have some insight into exactly the best places, to kind of apply that to your processes, your people, and then ultimately that technology. So,
right. Yeah. So, yeah, boy, a lot comes to mind as you're talking about that. So, the first thing I would say to our audience, is it's first of all, it's about balance. So, you can't ignore the new technologies. You can't ignore being innovative. You can't ignore stepping out front. You just need to understand that there's some risk there and be okay with stubbing your toe a little bit along the way as you make those learnings. And then as you do make those learnings, then you can, Jared, as you said, kind of apply that then directly to like a larger data set. So in your example, with the wells, so maybe you don't want to bring in all that 3 and 4 times the amount of data for 100 wells on day one, but maybe you do that for 2, 3, 5, 10, whatever, to the point that then you understand it, and then you can sift through that data and make a educated determination about what's going to be valuable, or depending if you're doing a different type of technology, it's not just data. Once you figure out what's valuable to your organization and your operations, then you can scale that. Just make sure that whatever you're trying is scalable. That's a big deal. So, you were talking about this data coming in from the wells. How do you handle that from a bandwidth perspective? So if you're double, tripling, quadrupling the amount of data coming in from the well, a lot of these wells, I don't know about all yours in particular, but a lot of them are remote. Communications can be tricky. So how are you handling that?
Yeah, I would say where we've had the most success, again, in the context of relatively a smaller oil and gas operator, has been we tend to, instead of bringing a lot of those functions in-house, we tend to do a lot of SaaS type solutions for a lot of reasons. Some of it's just time, right? We have a very SEAL Team 6, small, kind of very focused group here. And so, they're good at what they do. If we want to start wading into this world of all the data that we're getting, to really do that, we have to go find kind of best in class ways to bring that data in, instead of recreating it ourselves. And we found that for us, while it can be maybe more expensive to do that, we almost really don't have an option. We just do not have the scale to bring in those internal resources to do that. In the future, absolutely, as you grow and you start bringing in that scale, there's kind of that cycle progression, right? As you grow and get bigger in a business, where you start to say, okay, where does it make sense to start bringing some of those in-house? But that's typically what we've done is use some of those third-party SaaS solutions where they have a very targeted, application for what we're needing, and we can go out there and say, oh wow, we don't have to recreate the wheel. You've got that. And our industry has seen a lot of innovation in the types of companies that are doing that. So as an example, about 4 or 5 years ago, we do a lot of asset evaluation when we look at the assets that we're going to get in. So we do a lot of A&D, M&A when we're looking at assets that we're going to invest in. 4 or 5 years ago, there were really kind of like 2 modeling softwares. I won't mention them. There was just not a lot of competition. And because of that, there just wasn't a lot of innovation, right? They weren't user friendly. A lot of times the data sets that you were pulling into these models were like two different companies. So there wasn't a really good way to kind of aggregate those two things together. A few months ago, we ran across our second company who was kind of jumping in and disrupting that space. They had developed a software that would automatically put our models together. Before, we would have to go asset by asset and build all of those things individually. They would aggregate and run those models in real time in like 5 seconds, right? They would take what would take a day to look at an asset and try to figure out something and just aggregate your data and put all of the modeling on those assets. They took a day's work to 5 seconds, right? And then they also integrated some of the public and regulatory data that we were using, that we were buying from a separate data source. They all of a sudden had that, integrated with theirs, so that you didn't have to worry about importing things, right? That was massively impactful for our business, because, like I said, we're a very strategic, focused, small group of people, and so we have to be really efficient with our time. I can look at the industry going back the last 20 years. It really struggled with that, and maybe pre-COVID, you started to see a lot more people as we've had some downturns in the industry, as we've lost some people to kind of the industry. It's really required the industry to be a lot more strategic in the way that they're taking this very complex, multi-disciplined, all of this kind of overwhelming data. How can we start getting efficient with that? And so we implemented that into a lot of our underwriting that we do for our investments a few months ago, and it's been so impactful. It's reduced the job for us, and it's taken certain functions and distilled them down. What took us a week to do we can do in a few hours. And for a small company, again, who doesn't have the scale to do that, when you find someone who's really put together and really thought through some of the processes and how to aggregate and integrate those things more efficiently, a lot of value add for us as a business as we kind of apply it through our business.
Yeah, so that's a great point about the SaaS solutions. So you get economy of scale without having to be, the behemoth of the industry. And along with that, a lot of learning. So you don't have to go through and reinvent and relearn how to, create that wheel, so to speak. If someone else has already done that and they're doing that. I mean, that's where, used to, we would go into businesses and they would constantly tell us how they were different. Everything they did was so different. And nowadays, I think you have to be a little careful in accepting that model and accept that a big chunk of what you do is just like what everybody else is doing. So don't try to make your processes so complex that you fit outside the standard model and you can't benefit from those inherent efficiencies that have been built into those applications and so forth. Now, there are places. So the real trick, what I'm seeing across the board, is for different business owners to find those sweet spots where their unique interpretation of data, their unique implementation, their unique way of doing whatever is their true differentiators. If they can find that and figure out how to plug that in to this overall more generic model of how that type of business runs in that industry, then that's where the success comes from, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for again, a lot of decisions and things, you always wonder why a decision gets made to go left or to go right when it comes to picking technology, trying to understand your data. I think one of the challenges that SaaS has kind of solved for us is, you only have so much time. And if you can find people who are trying to solve the same problems that you have, but I've got 100 problems. What did they say? I got 99 problems. I'm gonna a lot of problems. I got a lot of problems, right? And I can't solve all those problems. And so when you find somebody who is really thinking through, because and what I've found is a lot of the problems that are most impactful to a company like us, who is smaller but also very agile and flexible and innovative. Any time they can really take processes and make those a lot more efficient, for us probably has the best ROI when we're looking at, again, the 100 problems that we have and where we need to select to address in our business and where we're going to go spend capital. Where the cream kind of rises to the top is when you find some of those providers that you can just tell they weren't out there just throwing something against the wall to try to just have technology for technology's sake. They really sat down and understand, okay, where is the time waste there. So as an example, one of the, I used to always say this, we'd hire teams of engineers in the past when I had big, large teams. So I was the vice president of operations for 2 different companies. And we would pretty frequently get some of these younger engineers in there. And I started kind of developing this thought that, when these engineers come in and they think they're going to do all of this engineering and operational procedures, and they're going to be spending most of their time doing that, I didn't want to scare them away, but a lot of times it was like, you're going to get to do that about 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, especially as a project manager and as an engineer working on these projects, the other 50% of the time, you're going to be an accountant. And that used to be always our running joke is my goodness, you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. The oil and gas business is such it's such a capital intensive industry. And so you're doing these $100 million projects. It was really interesting. I was 2 years in the industry, and I was in an executive meeting, and one of the executives turned around and looked at this piece of paper, and he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 26." And he goes, "Well, we apparently gave you $100 million worth of capital to spend last year." And I went, "Oh my goodness, I spent $100 million last year?" He's like, "Yeah, how long have you been in this company?" I'm like, "Well, I've been in business for 2 years." So, it's such a capital intensive industry to begin with. And so, you'd have these engineers, doing their projects and making decisions and getting information and data and doing systems. What was never contemplated in the kind of the back end administration of the oil and gas business was the accounting, right? We had stacks of unstructured data, right? Stacks of invoices that we would stamp and hand code and write coding on and sign. And then there was this whole process, right, that would go downstream of that. One of the things that we did, and what I've done at previous companies and what we do here is we went to electronic invoicing, right, where that data, that you still had that unstructured data, but they would put it in a structured form, and then it would get pushed through into our systems, and then you didn't have to, it wasn't mailed, you didn't have to have an accountant who touched it. It went directly to the end user, a lot of times already coded, already with the right information that needed to go in there. and what it did, and how that just that very simple. I mean, it wasn't simple. Electronic invoicing requires a lot of well thought out understanding of those processes and how it's being used. And when we grabbed some of those, it was a SaaS solution in this case. When we grabbed that company and implemented it in our business, I mean, the amount of time our engineers were using on specific projects that they were working on probably got reduced to half, which meant they had a lot more time that they could actually spend on, trying to watch out for problems and try to save money and find other efficiencies in other ways, which was a lot better use of their salary and what you pay an engineer than having them just spend half of their time, chase down that invoice that got lost or figure that out. And so that's just a story of what we do currently and how we bring a lot of those efficiencies. But like you were saying, man, the most impactful that we have seen applying this technology is when those people have really understand our process, and you can see that when we're evaluating how we're going to apply some of those technologies to our business. I mean, you can see it, and they either understand and they've been there and done that, and like, man, we're going to address these three issues. They're interrelated. We're going to address this, and it's pretty obvious, as a business owner, when you see solutions like that.
Wow. So one of the items that we've had to deal with quite a bit, and honestly, one of the places I've seen this the most is in oil and gas. So not only is there that unstructured data, but there's, in most organizations, a plethora of Excel files out there that's on someone's desktop, and it becomes integral and a required part of the overall doing all those balancing operations that you're talking about, making sure that all of the labs are done, all of those pieces to the puzzle gets kind of sketchy when it's out there on those spreadsheets and somebody's desktop crashes. And oh, by the way, that just happened to be, that file was in a location that is not being backed up for whatever reason. It's not in the cloud. It's not on a backup server. Wow, that can be a big deal, depending on exactly what it is. So,
yeah, and you lose some data integrity as well, right? A classic example was, something that I had entered on a sheet and then sent it to somebody else. By the time it moved through the organization, a few weeks went by, and I went to go actually look it up in one of our systems, and it was wrong. And I'm like, wait a minute. I went and looked at my notes. Well, this is what I sent. Well, three people touched it, and two people in different departments, hand entered it in, and all of a sudden someone fat figured something, and there you go, right? And now I'm making decisions off of data that is, not accurate.
Factually incorrect, right? And lots of times people have the best of intentions. I'm correcting this error, I'm doing that. But the point being, what you saw the data as is now no longer the data. And more likely, there's no trail to know who changed what, when, and that sort of thing. So that's problematic and causes a lot of churn in inefficiencies and just trying to track that down and figure out what happened. So that's a big deal, and especially in that field. I know one of the most interesting things that I learned when I got into oil and gas, we were migrating data, or actually doing an integration from one system to the other. And in that integration, the target system had a decimal precision of 6, and the source system had a decimal precision of 8. And man, talk about conversations, because us as the tech guys, we were like, well, what do you guys want to do with this? I mean, we can just round it up, we can round it down, whatever. They're like, oh, no, you don't understand. Well, yeah, I didn't understand at that time, but in certain cases, that can mean millions of dollars difference. And it was mind blowing to me, the precision and what the resulting dollar value would be on that. So it's important that the data is accurate and kept.
We're actually going through that right now. We made as we've grown as a business, we've so we kind of have two parts of our business. We raise, we're a general partner, and we raise money from limited partners, and we put out usually one, if not two, strategic funds every year. And then two, we have an oil and gas part of the business. And, a little bit different businesses. One's kind of more on there's some fintech solutions that we've kind of brought to address a lot of the paperwork and a lot of the compliance, a lot of the things we need. But on the oil and gas side, obviously we've talked about the complexity. And one of the things that both of them need is an accounting system. And we kind of had a legacy system that we've been in the process over the last few months since Q4 of 2023 of starting to migrate a lot of that data, fund data over, and also our operational data over. And what a challenge, right? We obviously went over to the accounting portion of, and the reason why we selected the accounting system was, again, really because as you started to look at it, it's a very specific to oil and gas. But what they also allowed us to do was allowed us to do some fund accounting as well inside that. And so, and some of the integration between those two systems, and then how it talks to our fintech platform that we use for all of our investors, that integration became huge to us, right? Because we didn't need to do that. So we kind of were necessitated. We didn't want to, but it really necessitated us moving over to the system and doing all of the cleanup and all of the migration to get over to that system. Because again, someone had really thought out, hey, if you integrate some of these other things together, it'll, as you scale up and get bigger, as we launch bigger funds, as we have more investors, and then we have more wells, again, it's really going to bring a lot of those efficiencies that if we stayed with that old system, it just wasn't gonna cut it.
Yeah. So timing out when you move and migrate to a larger, more sophisticated system can be an important strategic decision process for any business. And when you're smaller, it's harder for you to recoup those losses when you make the mistake than when you're larger. I mean, like we talked about, so the megaliths of the industries, be it Conoco or whoever, they can afford to make a couple $1 million mistake, and it just doesn't even hit a blip on the overall budget. But for those of us running the smaller businesses, that might be something that you can't recover from. So you just have to be more careful and strategic about when you make those moves, and even who you get to do it. So and where you get that help. So I'm curious. You talked about in your past bringing in engineers, and then of course now you're using SaaS solutions. So you're vetting those SaaS solutions. You're potentially vetting IT folks that are going to help you with some of those processes. So what measures do you use? What do you look for when you're looking at those groups to make a determination about who you can bring in and who you can't? One of the things, so today, earlier this morning, I was in a meeting and they were talking about, actually it was an attorney talking about his fees. And he says, well, but if you, he said to the group there, if you look at it, if you go try to hire some new hire out of law school, then how much is it going to cost you, one, for that person to figure out what to do when we've done it, 1,000 times, and two, if they make a mistake. So, I see the same thing in IT, but I'm curious how you do your vetting and what kind of things you look for to make a determination and trust them with that kind of effort.
you've got to hire really talented people. So in the case of the example that I just gave on the accounting system, we went out and grabbed a contract controller who had 10 years of experience with a bunch of other companies, but it's specifically in that system that we were going to. Like we had to have that. We could not mess around with not doing that correctly. Now again, you're going to pay for that, right? You're going to pay for that, but because it's and here's we're kind of like skirting around like when to pay, when to as a business. When is it necessary to go put those dollars, like put your money where your mouth is? And, you really have to have an attitude and a culture within your business that understands and really had a view to how important getting good people, processes, and technology, that kind of three-legged stool, integrated well. And so again, for us, it's hiring very, very competent people, whether that's internally or we use, a third-party contractor to do that, and definitely experience in that system that you're using is, it cuts down on that learning curve, right? We had some data migration issues, and even though they couldn't do that, they had run across some data integrity issues from one system to the other, and it was a real quick phone call to, hey, we've been down this road before. How do we integrate this successfully, and how do you clean that up? And we didn't possess or have the time to learn that, and so that was that knowledge, understanding, hey, you need to go talk to this person, was absolutely critical for us to be able to move. Like I said, I got a bunch of other problems. I can't sit and now figure out this problem. You got that person either knows or they don't. And if they don't know, I mean, you can't see the top of my head, but it's starting to recede. Well, I've been down there wasting time trying to get the right person in because we had the wrong person in. And again, I may not look old, but I feel old because I have done that. Like I said, made those mistakes in the past, and definitely don't want to do that again. So,
well, Jared, that's really great information. And to our audience, be sure to go down and like, subscribe, make a comment. That helps promote the channel and will help us get other great guests like Jared. We appreciate the information Jared's given us and providing to the audience here. So make sure you do that. That way, especially with the subscribing, you'll get notified of the future podcasts coming along. We've already got a number of people lined up that are just outstanding guests like Jared, but that will help us improve on that list and even get you some more content. So please do that. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned all of the data that you're bringing in and the analytics. So what do you think is kind of not to give away any trade secrets here, but what's been kind of the gem? What kind of information are you passionate about getting, and how has that helped improve your business and the value you provide to your client base?
Yeah, probably one of the most interesting things that we've been leveraging lately has been, there's a lot of public data that's getting, we have assets that we invest in kind of all over the country and in multiple different states, right? And so, one of the things that we've kind of figured out, starting almost a little over a year ago, was some really creative ways to start harvesting and mining some of that public data and integrating it into a lot of our underwriting for assets. There's so much data out there, and unfortunately, it's the government, right? So some of these governments don't have, how do you put this? They haven't. They're just kind of whatever person convinced them that, hey, this is what you need because it's great for, putting out data. Usually it's not, right? And usually it's just like a website. But being able to start finding ways to start scraping and mining that data and bringing it into our processes has really, for us, by doing that, we were able to find a lot of assets. We're kind of a middle market investment company. We're not this, $100 million, $200 million type funds. We're really kind of a more of a middle market. Our sweet spot is in kind of that, $10 to $25 million kind of asset range. And so by leveraging and starting to use a lot of this public data, what we were able to find is some opportunities that were out in public, that these operators were coming in and providing a bunch of really good data. We just weren't using it anywhere in our business, partly because the thought of trying to navigate their website to try to pull that information, I mean, it made me want to like chain smoke or something. It stressed me. It stressed me out. It really stressed me out. And then when we thought, you know what? Why don't we just start hiring some programmers to start to scrape this data and put it in ways. We're looking for a very specific documents. We're looking for very specific, not just structured data within that government data, but also the unstructured data. Can we pull data off of those? I mean, this was mineral owners and leasehold owners, that all the information with all of the decimals and ownerships and whether they were participating or not participating, being able to aggregate that data and put it together and then start using it to start not only originating deals. We used to on a yearly basis. It was great if we would evaluate 80 deals, 100 deals in a year, right? We're probably originating in a month, probably 80 deals from that data, and finding little pieces that were kind of falling through the cracks, right? Where we can kind of step in and we can look at that and really provide an underwriting around that. What the challenge was for us and where we are kind of going in the future is, so now that we are originating 12 times, 15 times the amount of deal flow that we were seeing previously, it created another issue. And the other issue was, well, it was easy to underwrite and do all of our modeling, financial modeling, and all our geological and oil and gas modeling for 80 deals in a year. Well, now we're doing that in a month, and it required us to start pairing that data and some of that automatic, automated modeling that we were doing previously. It really had us started to go, how do we get more efficient at this? Because we've just introduced a lot more deal flow, 10x our deal flow. How do we get more efficient at not only getting that deal flow into our models, but then identifying, okay, here's kind of the needle in the haystack that we're looking for our investors. And so that's what we're really doing really over the next year is we've partnered with some companies who were already starting to aggregate public data and pull it into their own systems. Now it's a little bit early for that, but we're talking to them, and as they're moving into other states and other places, we're kind of, hey, we're not ready to maybe pull the plug on you yet, but we want to be involved in that conversation as you start to get better and develop, pulling in that data. And then, really for us, everyone likes to talk about, AI, right? And how to do that. I mean, there's the opportunity for us to really be able to take a lot of these data sets that were being underutilized and kind of this, analytics piece. There's going to be some really interesting things in the future. We'll have to come on maybe in a year from now as we're moving forward. There's going to be some really interesting things that we're going to be utilizing. We'd really like kind of the vision of where we're going in the future of what we see happening for us is that we can take this amount of deal flow and we can completely automate our underwriting process, our aggregation of all this data, being able not only to clean it up, but to distill down, okay, here's the opportunities and the places that we want to look at. As we start to understand that process a lot better, there are already companies that we're talking to, some bigger companies, maybe they've got some private equity money behind them, or you see a lot of private equity companies starting to move into this, is automating that deal flow and underwriting. That's where we see is kind of a big challenge that was kind of created by us. We saw, wow, this data is really being underutilized. Okay, how do we now do that? And I think that AI is gonna have a big role in helping us take these massive data sets and some of these underwriting, which a lot of them we've automated. You can kind of marry those two things together and say, okay, help us distill down into the assets that meet these investment KPIs and these goalposts that we've created for our funds and our investors. That's really the vision of what we're going to be doing probably over the next few years. Is really trying to find those kind of gems and being a lot more efficient and a lot more accurate on how we handle those.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great initiative, and it seems like a great use of the technology there to help you rise that cream to the top and make sure you're being most efficient with your efforts and so forth. So that sounds exciting. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you being on. Exciting to hear what you're doing over there at Invito. And we would love to have you back next year or whenever it's the appropriate time to hear about these new initiatives you're working on. But in the meantime, tell our audience how they can stay in touch, how they can track and follow what you're doing there.
Yeah, if people want to follow us, the funds that we put out and some of the projects that we're investing in, they can go to our website, www.invitoep.com. That's invitoep.com. There you'll find links to our fintech platform that has a lot of the legal documents and assets and things that we're doing if they're interested in investing. Of course, we're active on social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, and I'm sure you guys will include those in the show notes. But we're publishing stuff on LinkedIn pretty regularly, and so those are the two main ways they can get a hold of us. And we'd love to walk you through what we do and how we do it. And it's definitely been a pleasure being on.
Awesome. Yes, definitely check the description below. Be links in that as well. And so you can track with Jared. Be sure to, again, like and subscribe to the video. Make some comments if you're here on LinkedIn as well. That way it helps bump the algorithm. And again, it helps us get more content that will help you out. Hope you found a lot of good information today. And hey, take care. We'll see you guys next time.